Hatibu from Policy Forum. This is the fourth year running that we are doing an analysis of the CAG's report with Wajibu Institute of Public Accountability. So Policy Forum provides space for their members, who Wajibu is one of them, to create a dialogue with the people and listen to what the people have to say on behalf of the majority who cannot be present here today. So the analysis of the CAG's report done by Wajibu Institute will compose of audit report from 2019-2020. That was the last year's implementation. And the CAG is given mandate by the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania in the Public Audit Act, right, of 2008. So every March, the CAG has to present his findings to the president, and then later on they're tabled to the parliament. The key issues under discussion are that the challenges that the public account face in complying with the financial framework, and then there is one that is the national budget a control tool, as in ministries, departments, and agencies, they plan and they budget, and then what is allocated afterwards is less than what they planned for. And then they expected to reach the same goals that they reach. So is the national budget a control tool? And then there is increase of red flags in corruption. That is one of the things that the CAG's report has cited. And also the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, because the CAG is supposed to physically audit the embassies, 43 embassies in Tanzania. And then now due to COVID-19, there are issues that you cannot go and audit them physically. So is that one of the challenges? I would like to welcome the Executive Director of Wajibu Institute of Public Accountability and also the former CAG, Mr. Ludovic Uto, so he can give us an overview of what the analysis composes of. Karibu sana, Mr. Uto.
Before I get into my presentation, I would want to take this opportunity once again to thank Policy Forum for giving us the space to share with your members, whom we belong to, on our initial findings on the CAG reports for the year 2019-2020. Key insights, unfortunately, it has almost been introduced. What I'm going to dwell on, ladies and gentlemen, quickly, is on challenges facing public sector accountants in complying with the financial reporting frameworks of IPSAS, International Public Sector Accounting Standards, and IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. These are the international standards we have adopted in Tanzania in the preparation of our financial statements. And we shall look at the law implementation of audit recommendations, which has been a common feature. We shall look at the national budget not being used as a control tool, law compliance to corporate governance and internal audit structures. We will quickly go through the weaknesses which are very apparent of ICT systems adopted in this country, where sometimes instead of the systems being of advantage, they end up being of disadvantage by the nature of how things are arranged. We will see a very shocking trend of the unfavorable environment in supporting investment and trade in this country. This fund, which has, every year we talk about it, the 10% LGA, Women, Youth, and Disabled Persons Fund, which was started years ago in the 90s, but to date, it has not been able to operate as a fund. Then we will look at the red flags on corruption and fraud. We will quickly see the impact of COVID-19, and we will come up with the proposed recommendations on what should be done to get things improved in the future. The diagram you are seeing there is quickly explaining the 4 types of audit opinions which are normally issued by the Controller and Auditor General. The hati safi, unqualified opinion. The hati yenye shaka, qualified opinion. The hati isiyoridhisha, adverse opinion. Na hati mbaya is the disclaimer of opinion. Audit opinions, they are based on how the financial statements being audited have been prepared. they look at the compliance of the adopted standards in the preparation of the financial statements, and therefore, depending on how your financial statements are being prepared, the Controller and Auditor General will decide on the magnitude of your non-compliance, and therefore either, if it's so bad, the situation is so bad, he will say he has been unable to issue an opinion, which is the hatimbaya, disclaimer of opinion. If it is like that, not that bad, he will go to the adverse, and progressively that way, coming to the unqualified opinion, which is the best opinion, the Controller and Auditor General can give any auditee after his audit. We have taken one example of the audit opinions issued to the local government authorities. There is a significant change of audit opinions this year as compared to last year. Last year, the CAG issued only 9 qualified opinions to the LGAs. Adverse opinions last year were 0. This year, the situation is very, very different. 53 LGAs have been issued with qualified audit opinions as compared to the 9 issued last year. And 8 LGAs have been issued with adverse opinions as compared to the 0 of last year. What we are seeing this year, that the quality of preparation of the financial statements for local governments in this year was bad compared to the previous year. That is, we are seeing a problem of the ability and the competence of the accountants in the local government authorities and also in the public sector in their understanding of these international standards, which we adopted way back in 2004 as a country, seeing what should be done to improve the situation. And the only thing we would want to say is that, in the first place, this thing goes back to our education system, in actual fact. We are educating people, our accountants are graduating, but I'm not sure whether they are adequately impacted with the practical understanding of how to make use of these standards in the preparation of these financial statements. And therefore, the remedy to that, we think, is continuous training of our accountants on the IPSAs and the IFRS, taking into consideration that these standards, they are not static. They are continuously changing, and therefore the need of our accountants in the public sector to have continuous training on these standards for them to be continuously being able to be competent and be able to adequately make use of these international standards in the preparation of the accounts. Once the situation we have seen with the audit opinions, the local government authority, which is applicable even in the central government and public authorities, is that there is a risk of misleading users of the financial statements of the LGAs and other reported on entities. And this is, as I said, a reflection of non-adherence to the financial reporting framework, which in our case, public sector, we have adopted the IPSAs and IFRS. And also, it leads into misstatements of the amounts presented in the financial statements, which will give out incorrect information in as far as the financial statements are concerned. We give an example of Chamwino, questionable amount of supplies and the consumables reported in cash flow statement of 2.7 billion. Chamber DC unsupported adjustments made to employees' costs of 1.2 billion. Geita DC restatement of comparative figures without disclosures of TZ 13.9 billion. All these, they distort information and therefore they mislead users of these financial statements, and this is something of concern which has to be rectified in future years. Implementing of recommendations. You see the diagram there. This fellow, he has picked some issues, and this other guy says, haya mengine VP. The implementation of audit recommendations. Why does the CAG give recommendations, ladies and gentlemen? The CAG gives audit recommendations of establishing apparent weaknesses, either in internal control systems or in the operations of an entity, and he gives recommendations with the view of wanting the auditee to implement these recommendations in order to improve his operations. You remember that when I was the CAG, I made the noise for 8 years on the government being robbed through ghost workers. Every year I raised it, and every year it was not acted upon. But happily, with the fifth phase government, it acted on that, and the government was able to save billions of money. I think 19 point something billion every month on the monies which were being stolen through ghost workers. CAG recommendations, there is importance of implementing parliamentary oversight committees, because these recommendations are aiming at improving the operations of the audited entities and not anything else. And therefore, the reluctance of implementing these recommendations sometimes gets us confused and frustrated. Budget execution. This is another area, I think, which as a country, we have to say, we are not doing very well, believe me. Last year, the CAG is telling us that the government was able to collect 95% of its projections, which is a brilliant thing. And on that score, I think we need to congratulate the government. Because if you remember, in the previous year, the collection was short off by 21%. Reducing the 21% shortfall to a 5% is a credible achievement, and the government deserves a commendation. That said, if we had a 5% shortfall in collection, if the budget execution was properly supervised, you cannot get the logic of having a disbursement for development projects to the tune of 46%. You see, that one does not match. It does not match the 5%. There is something amiss on how we are managing our whole budget cycle. You see, there is big amounts of money collected revenue, not remitted to consolidated fund. If you go to Article 135 of our Constitution, it says that every government money collected is supposed to be submitted to the consolidated fund. It's called in Kiswahili mfuko mkuu wa serikali. And what the fifth phase government did, coming up with payment to a central account through the control numbers, was literally an implementation of this requirement of the Constitution 135. Akikuwa kitu kipya, ni kwamba tu nobody had thought of doing it that way. But in spite of that, coming up with the policy of payment to a single account, in spite of the government doing its best in coming up with control numbers in payment, we are still having a substantial amount of money of the government not being paid to the consolidated fund, which is a shortfall in the implementation of our budget cycle. We are being told external borrowings, direct transfers to projects. Money comes in from outside, is not captured into the consolidated fund. Instead, it is immediately transferred to projects. This one distorts the information on the budget. LGA's own source revenue, last year it was worse. We had 553. This year the amount has drastically reduced to 132, which money was collected by the LGS but not remitted to the consolidated fund, which again is something good. Non-tax revenue from embassies last year was 4 billion. Of course, this year it was the CIG did not audit, and therefore he would not know because of COVID. Visa application fees collected over the counter was 0.6 billion. This year we don't know because the CIG did not audit the embassies because of COVID. But we see unclaimed deposit balances not remitted to Treasury. Last year it was 3.4. This year it has reduced to 1.6, which is a remarkable improvement. So we are seeing improvements. We are seeing stagnation on some other areas. And I think, in fairness, where there is improvement, we have to acknowledge it. And where shortfalls continue, we have also to say it. And I think this is in the spirit of our sixth phase government, Her Excellency Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, where she talked of us being transparent, tuwe wawazi. It is through being transparent that we'll be able to improve on our weaknesses and move forward in a faster speed than it is. On corporate governance, internal controls, you see, most of the problems reported by the CAG of unaccounted for expenditure, of what? These emanate from weak internal controls. One, we are seeing our public authorities, they are regulated by the Treasury Registrar. And the Treasury Registrar has given out a circular, number 12 of 2015, which gives guidance on how board of directors of public entities should conduct their business. We are told that under normal circumstances, a normal functioning organization should have at a minimum 4 board meetings. And of course, you can have some extraordinary few meetings. But when an institution decides to have 13 board meetings in a year, that is an excess which cannot be accepted, because there is an implication, there is a cost implication. If you remember, last year, we came up with one organization which was Ngorongoro. Ngorongoro, the CAG last year reported through board meetings they had spent 1.2 billion on board meetings. That it cannot be acceptable. That you cannot justify. There can be no value for money on such a huge expenditure on meetings. The other problem which has been persistent is where our public authorities find themselves operating without board of directors. That is a very, very serious issue. If a public authority is in existence for a year, 2 years without a board of directors, because there are decisions which cannot be taken by management. Full stop. Management cannot sign audited accounts. It's not their business to approve the entity's strategic plans. It's not their business or management to approve operational budgets. So these are things which, without a board, an organization will find itself missing, and therefore affecting the whole governance structure of the entity. And on this one, we shall come up with the recommendations. Absence of board of directors weakens internal control systems in providing strategic direction of the entities, thus affecting their overall performance, even finance performance. You will close the financial year, you will prepare accounts. In order for the accounts to be sent to the auditor, they have to be signed by the board of directors. There are very many disadvantages which accrue from public authorities operating without board of directors. I don't think the lack of board of directors of public authorities is arising from lack of competent Tanzanians to fill the positions. So I think it's just a matter of weak bureaucracy, which I think takes so long to identify these people, and so that our public organizations have what they require in order for them to operate effectively. We still have a big problem with internal controls in our public authorities. If you go to the public finance regulations of 2001 as amended, regulations 28 to 35 talks of internal controls and audit committees. And it says, the regulation says that it is the responsibility of an accounting officer to ensure that the entity he or she is managing has effective working internal control systems. That is the job of the accounting officer. ICT systems to support PFMA. On this one, I'm saying that in this country, we are getting into using IT. But we are getting into using IT without a national policy to guide the use of IT. As a result of which, people are investing heavily in ICT systems, but at the end of the day, we are finding that these ICT systems, either they are not fully working as a system, you need to intervene with manual operations, or these systems, they are not linked, they are not talking to each other. And as a result of that, we are seeing duplication of effort. The information, ladies and gentlemen, you submit in getting your national ID is the same information you are required to submit in getting a passport. The question is, if this is one government, why can't the passport people get the information from the NIDA people, or vice versa? Why do you have to repeat? Every time you go, you are repeating the same information. We want a coordinated government. This country has come up with an ICT system called TANEPS, Tanzania Electronic Procurement System. The CAG has reviewed this system, and he has come up with these shortfalls of that system. Promotion of investment and trade. This is another serious issue to look at, ladies and gentlemen. To implement the 5-year development plan, there are activities to be performed by public authorities with mandate to promote, facilitate, and coordinate investments, technology transfer, industry, and trade. These entities are faced with institutional challenges, operational challenges, cultural challenges, and financial and human resource challenges. Promoting investment and trade. And there is a decrease in the number of investment projects registered under TIC for the 5 years from 2015-16 to 2019-20 is 48%. There has been an increase of 48% from 2015-16 to 2019-20. And the data is as shown there. If you look at investment projects registered, in 2015-16 we had 420, in 2019-20 we have 219. Value of new investment projects in USD millions, you see in 2015-16 we had 7,716,000. In 2019-20 we have 1,853. Jobs created from new investment projects. In 2015-16 we had 63,000. In 2019-20 we have got 32, almost half. And this is the trend of investment. And in a country whereby we have a serious problem of employment of our youth, this is a serious thing to observe, and it needs the immediate attention of the government to reverse this negative trend. Otherwise, we are going to seriously escalate the problem of employment of our youth. If you look at this other slide, it's showing the decrease in capital investment and export processing zone authority for the years 2015-16, 1920 is by 88% drop, almost coming to 100%. This slide here inasema wakati linajengwa hili jengo tuliambiwa ni mradi wa machinjio. Huu ni mwaka wa 6 sasa wanaishi popo. Mamilioni yametumika. We have a serious problem of completion of projects. Sometimes we do not complete them. Sometimes we complete them but we don't use them. And there are very many examples of that. Sometimes I am not sure whether we as Tanzanians, we understand that these assets, these national assets, they belong to us. They belong to me, they belong to you. And believe me, if as Tanzanians, sometimes I wonder whether we are truly accountable. Because if we were accountable as Tanzanians, we would be making noise. Why are these buildings, why are these facilities which are completed not being used? Is the national budget a control tool? This is a very, very important thing. A well-prepared budget is supposed to be a control tool if it's well managed and supervised. The amount of effort and the resources put in preparing the budget should be replicated in the control and supervision of the implementation of the budget. I think we need Parliament to get more involved in the supervision of the implementation of the budget in order for the budget to be a control tool and not otherwise. On the red flags, very bad also. If you look at the overall 17-18 and 19-20, believe me, it's shocking. In 2017-18, we had a 207 billion. In 2019-20, we have got an overall figure of 2,708 billion. It has increased by more than 100%. The COVID has had a very serious impact on the economy, leaving aside the loss of human life. And we are told the CAG could not audit for 6 embassies. And the impact of that audit is that he could not issue an audit opinion to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and East Africa Cooperation. General recommendations. The public sector appointing authority of public accountants should adopt the use of carrot and stick approach in enforcing the application of IPSAS and IFRS in preparing financial statements. Yeah, those accountants who are not performing, they should be pushed, they should be made to perform. Otherwise, we will have this laissez-faire attitude and nothing will change. 2, the government should come up with a mechanism of ensuring that there is an increased rate of implementation of both the CAG's and the Parliamentary Oversight Committee's recommendations. 3, there should be a section in the Public Corporation Act of 1992 that allows current board members to continue implementing their functions after the expiry of their tenure until a new board is appointed, in order to remove that lacuna or that vacuum which exists when a board's tenure expires and there is no appointment of a new board. The government should conduct a review of all ICT systems currently in use and find ways of consolidating related systems. There is no need of having 2 systems doing the same thing. Literally, that review should remove these anomalies. The government to develop a standard ICT policy, which we are lacking, unfortunately. The government to effectively implement a blueprint for regulatory reforms to improve the business environment in the country. The government to insist on the inclusiveness of citizens in the implementation of development budgets. The citizens should be more involved. President's Office, Regional Administration and Law Government, in collaboration with the regional secretariats, to enforce implementation of guidelines for managing the Women, Youth and Disabled Empowerment Fund. And 9, the law enforcing organs, including PCCB, DCI, DPP, to enforce the implementation of the amended sections 27 of the Public Audit Act 11, which says that when the Controller and Auditor General is auditing and it comes across as a fraudulent or a corruptive transaction, he should immediately submit that data and information to the other law enforcing organs for their action. We want to see that being worked on more than it has been in the past. Government to institute and establish a documented fraud prevention plan and fraud risk management. Thank you very much for listening. My humble request to you is that once we launch our accountability reports, they give you the highlights of the salient public interest issues. Asanteni sana kwa kunisikiliza.
I will pick up on very few key points or key trends that Mr. Uto picked up in his presentation and reflect on them, not in terms of trying to analyze what the CAG report said, but on the operating environment or the context that allows those things to take place in the first place, and then we can reflect together later whether there's something that stakeholders can do about it. The first key trend that I saw was on slide number 5. You know, things are kind of worsening. Trends in audit opinions, we had only 9 adverse opinions last year. This time it was 53 at LGA level. Likewise, trends in amount with red flags on fraud or corruption, yani zile hela zinazohisiwa kwamba zimehusishwa na rushwa au fraud, pia zimeongezeka. That was slide number 37. Mr. Uto glanced through it quite quickly. And I would like to reflect on something that he presented on slide 14, which was the weaknesses in routine checks and internal audit function. CAG anakuja mwaka mmoja baadaye. Kama wale wanaoangalia kila siku, yani whether ni internal auditor, whether ni audit committee ko functional au systems, zile ICT alizokuwa nazisema systems zinafanya kazi, inawezekana kungekuwa na urahisi wa kuyakamata haya matatizo mapema and to also start addressing them. So I am going to show that little cartoon over there. This is one of those internal audit jokes that we use at KPMG and elsewhere. So you have that little team of internal auditors in one LGA, and they're supposed to tell that big monster, who is supposed to be the dead, in this case, kwamba amekosea. Wanarushiana mpira po, you tell him the discrepancies. I'm not going to do it. And that's the relationship sometimes we see. The internal audit functions inakuwa ziko quite, it is empowered in many of our authorities and do not carry the same weight as the CAG. So if they were given the same level of respect, maybe in response, as the lead auditor there with a big heart, possibly things would have been a little bit different. So it is something that Mr. Uto mentioned, the importance of strengthening the internal routine check and internal control system. The second one is on the ICT systems, au mifumo saidizi ya kielektroniki kwa ajili ya kusaidia usimamizi wa fedha. Slide yake ya 16 ilionyesha challenges kwamba ziko nyingi, zina overlap, but they are also missing key modules which will give out aggregated reports. Slide 19 ilionyesha different figures. Unakuwa na sehemu hiyo LJ moja, mfumo mmoja unasema tumecollect milioni 340, mwingine unasema hapana ziko milioni 321, na zile discrepancies zina persist mpaka CAG anakuja hazijawa resolved. Labda ni pick on my own experience. Kwenye watu wanapotoka kwenye mifumo ya manual and then going into the electronic system, there is a tendency to continue to work in a manual fashion. So you use the ICT tool not as a system to improve your working and analysis of the data, but just as a system for storing information. So those modules that will give you the automatic analysis and linkages with other systems in the government do not, either are not installed or do not work. So in the end, the systems just end up being a storage of information, and therefore we're not very far away from a manual system that we used to have in place before. So I'll let Aidan pick that one up later. I'll stop right there. Just the problem is we don't really utilize the full potential of the ICT systems. Third point, Mr. Uto, I think you glanced through it and you did not present, ni hili swala la mikopo kwa vijana, wanawake na watu wenye ulemavu. Mr. Uto alisema tukua kuna positive things to tushukuru. That thing has improved over time. I mean, there's more money being allocated and there's more money being lent out to groups of women and men. Although the CAG is now saying kwamba 65% ya loans that are given out to these groups are not returned. They are not recovered. So they are getting the money, but they're not able to be refunded. Now, the trend has worsened actually by 6% from the previous audit. What we're trying to say here, how does this happen? Maybe we should reflect particularly, I see a lot of NGOs around here. Some of the research that was done last year by some of our collaborators, ANSAF, CARE, NCA, zinaonyesha wanawake wanafanya vizuri kwenye marejesho. However, vijana na watu wenye ulemavu bado kidogo, trendi sio nzuri. Kwa hiyo hapo ndio ambapo nadhani some of us could focus a little bit more, because most of these women have received over the years, toka mimi naanza kazi miaka ile ya 2000, a lot of income generating support to women, capacity on savings and credits. So at least these loans are coming, finding women are already a little bit a level up in terms of capacity and management of funds and experience in managing income generating projects. Unfortunately for youth, the effort hasn't been the same, and therefore it's a new market, and they are coming in without further support from the community development section that manages these loans. And because the LGAs are working, I would want to say in silos, but they're not collaborating with other actors to support this youth group once they actually receive the funds in terms of mentoring, support for their project, but also on the financial management side. So they're left alone, they're given the money, and most of the time, the projects do not perform, or they simply just run away with the money. So this is something that will get worse because there's more money to be given, there's more group to receive the money. So likelihood, it will get worse, but I think there's a room for improvement if the government collaborates with other stakeholders. There was something else on development projects. It's a call for all of us to take our time to read the performance audit reports, because they really tell you where is the source of the problem. Mfano, mzee Uto anasema trade and investment imekwenda chini sana. Lakini ukisoma performance audit ya Mbigiri Sugar Production au Mkulazi Holdings, I mean, there was a lot of hype about it. Katika sequencing ya kazi, watu wakahamasishwa, kiwanda kinakuja, limeni miwa. And people did, wananchi wa pale, maeneo ya pale. Waka-invest estimated kama 380 millions. Wamelima, hectares zao 740 za mua. Now the sugar cane is ready, the plant is not ready yet. Now these people have invested, the plant is not working, there is a lot of sugar cane that is ready, it has to be destroyed. And imagine this is a mwananchi who has invested. And Tanzania Bank had a credit line that was developed to support that investment. So that one is also affected. So the chain reaction that comes out of that mismanagement or just failure to sequence the investment in the right order can be very detrimental even to mtu mwananchi wa kawaida. So these audit reports, they're not just for the government. Zina impact hata mtu mdogo mdogo. Kwa ni vizuri kuangalia vile vitu na kuvi-amplify. Mfano huo mradi, I had to pick it up because it really matters for that little person. Reflect kwenye investment and trade.
I want to give you an example of transparency and how it can really make a difference. Corruption in Ukraine overthrew a government. Wananchi walichoka, wakaenda, wakaandamana, wakapindua serikali kwa sababu ya kitu kimoja tu, rushwa. Na baada ya hapo wakasema hatutaki kuishi maisha haya ya ubadhirifu wa fedha zetu, mwaka nenda, miaka rudi. Kwa hiyo wakabuni kitu kinachoitwa Prozoro, is the Ukraine's public procurement system. And their motto is one of the best I have ever heard. Everybody sees everything. Everybody sees everything, not something. They see everything in the public procurement process. So all of the public procurement in Ukraine, which is 15% of their GDP is $112 billion. 15% is public procurement. All of it is now visible to the public to see. So some quick data as to the impact. I don't know if we can see that very well. I'll just give you one number, actually. Because of ProZorro, there's this number here, 0. Total percent savings, the difference between value estimated and the contract value of the procurement. It was 0 baseline in 2015. By July 2017, just 2 years later, they were saving 10%. 10%. 10% or 15% of $112 billion in Ukraine's GDP amounts to $1.7 billion in savings from procurement. $1.7 billion. Tukifanya hiyo Tanzania, Tanzania's GDP is about $63 billion. If we assume kwamba procurement zetu is 15% of that, and we save 10% of that 15% because everybody sees everything, public procurement, it's open and transparent, we are saving $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year. 2.3 trillion shillings per year. Savings out of a budget of 33 trillion. That is slightly under 10%, right? So my one recommendation, everybody in Tanzania should see everything. Now, this sounds like a very simple thing. It's probably a very complicated thing to make our systems talk to each other, but the important thing ni kwamba ukiweka uwazi huo, basi na sisi tutahamasika na tuchukue jukumu la kuhamasika na kuhamasishana kwenda kuchambua zile data na kuuliza maswali. And that's my second point. And a second example, Italy. It's famously, and they also try to deal with their corruption problem with this idea called open coesione. Hata wao wana matatizo ya kimfumo na umoja wa Italy yao. Kwa hiyo wanapeleka fedha kutoka kwenye majimbo ya kaskazini ambayo na hela nyingi, Milan, sijui na wapi huko, kwenye majimbo ya kusini. Lakini wale wa kaskazini wale wana wasiwasi kwamba hela zao zinapoenda kule Sicily, Naples, kwenye mafia kule zinaliwa. So they set a system where everybody can find out about the money, follow it, and then press forward towards development. Okay? So this is Open Coesione, another transparency tool from Italy. Angalia, look at how much is actually being followed. 186.2 billion euros are monitored. 94.8 billion euro in payments have been monitored. 1,600,000 projects are monitored by ordinary people. Alafu wamesha jenga hata shule, wanakozi kwa wanafunzi wafuatilie projects ambazo ziko kwenye maeneo yao, shule, maktaba, viwanja vya michezo, vitu kama hivyo. Kwa hiyo hapa wanarahisisha uwezo wa wananchi kufuatilia fedha zao zinatumika wapi, zinatumika vipi, nani anapata hizo tenda, nani anamaliza, nani anachezea hela ili wachukuliwe hatua. Lakini bila uwazi wa aina hii, bila ule uwazi wa Ukraine na ProZorro, kwa kweli mambo mengi sana yanapotea. Sasa hili tunaliweza hili? Can we do this? Should we do this? So let us be serious. Tusikae hapa tunalalamika kwamba mambo haendi vizuri, sijui wanatumia zile hela. Jukumu ni letu sisi kama wananchi kudai mikutano ya serikali zetu za mitaa. Jukumu letu kama wananchi ni kuwaminya, kuwabana, kuwaburuza wabunge wetu waulize maswali ya kizushi, wengine maswali ya kizushi yanayofuatilia fedha hizi zinaenda wapi. Tusipokuwa na ujasiri huo, basi tuendelee kupokea ubadhirifu ule wa CAG reports na kulia machozi kwenye bia yetu kila siku. Alafu tunaenda maisha yana. Asanteni sana.
Kwenye ripoti ya CAG kuna jambo limezungumzwa kuhusu bodi ya mikopo ya wanafunzi wa elimu ya juu. CAG anasema kuna mwongozo wa ukataji mishahara unakiukwa. Mshahara wa mtumishi unatakiwa akikatwa madeni yake yote, PAYE na bima ya afya, unatakiwa walau baki 2/3. Lakini kuna watumishi wanakatwa mishahara na wengine hawapati kabisa. Bodi ya mikopo wanakata 15% ya mshahara kila mwezi. Kuna bima, kuna chama cha walimu wachangia 3% ya mshahara. Bado hajakatwa PAYE, hajakatwa PSSSF. Ukikata ule mshahara inazidi ile 2/3 ambayo inatakiwa ibaki kwenye mshahara. Mwongozo wa utoaji mkopo unasema deni la mnufaika litaongezeka kwa 6% kila mwaka kuanzia tarehe ambayo mnufaika alianza kupata ile pesa. Ni heri ukope benki umsomeshe mtoto wako kuliko kwenda kuchukua ule mkopo wa elimu ya juu, kwa sababu lile deni huwa halilipiki, halimaliziki kulipa. Ukitaka kulijua hilo, tangu ile mikopo ianze kutolewa mwaka 94 ni 3% tu ya wanufaika ambao wamemaliza kulipa deni, wengine wote hawajamaliza. Kwa nini? Unalipa milioni 2 kwa mwaka, deni linaongezeka kwa 6%, unajikuta imeongezeka milioni 1.8. Kwa hiyo mwaka mzima umelipa shilingi 200,000 tu. Jukwaa hili lilichukua hili swala lione linafanya nini, na mzee Uto nafikiri atakuwa ananielewa vizuri. Muiandikie serikali, muiambie kuhusu hili swala, wabadilishe ile sheria.
Asante.
Mzee wangu Uto alipokuwa anafanya presentation yake kwenye analysis ile ya CAG report, amegusia kitu kinachohusiana na watendaji kwenye halmashauri, hasa kwenye idara ya fedha. Sasa sisi tukaenda mbele zaidi kwamba hii hesabu mpaka inatoka inakaguliwa imepita katika ngazi tofauti, ikiwemo na ngazi ya madiwani. Tukaanza kujiuliza hawa madiwani ni wa aina gani? Representation yao ikoje kwenye hizo halmashauri mpaka wanaachia hizi hesabu zinatoka na hati chafu. Kwa hiyo tukaona sisi kama asasi za kiraia na watu wengine wote twende kwenye halmashauri tukaangalie aina ya wale madiwani walioko pale, ili tuwe na kitu cha kusema tunapokwenda kupiga kura, tuhamasishane ili tuweze kuchagua viongozi wanaotufaa ambao watakuwa wanapitia hata hesabu zetu, tunakuwa na hati safi badala ya kuwa na hati chafu. Asante.
Kuna taasisi kama 3 hivi wanasema kwamba hawakupelekewa ile report na mwezi Desemba, wamepelekewa Februari wakajibu, lakini majibu yao hakuwa included kwenye report ya mwisho wa CAG. Kwa sababu Muhimbili wanasema wameambiwa hapo kwenye quality assurance ya HR haikuwa nzuri, lakini walijibu haipo included kwenye report ya CAG. Jingine ni kwenye report ya CAG ya mwaka huu, lile bwawa la Mwalimu Nyerere kule, CAG anasema kwamba kuna upigaji kule, lakini pia wanasema wamelipa wako vizuri tu. Hii inakaje?
Ukiangalia tulikotoka, kuna wakati CAG ilikuwa ishakubalika kwamba akiweka bajeti yake pale, ikishakubaliwa kwenye kamati ile ya bunge, maana yake ni kwamba inapitisha moja kwa moja. Tukaona kilichotokea baadaye, tunaweza tukakubaliana hapa, Prozoro ikaja, tukakubaliana hii umeita open cohesion ikapita, lakini baadaye anatokea labda mtu mwingine mtawala, vyote vinaondolewa, tunarudi tena kwenye zero. Kwa swali langu Aidan, kutokana na uzoefu wetu wa miaka 3, 4, 5 iliyopita, nini kama jamii tunaweza tukafanya kuhakikisha kwamba zile gains ambazo tunazipata tunaweza tukazilinda, yani angalau kwamba tusirudi chini tena tulikotoka, tukao tunaenda mbele.
Kuhusu Muhimbili, ukaguzi tunaita participatory audit approach, ukaguzi wa ushirikishwaji. Auditor kabla hajaja anakupa notification kwamba is coming, na anakuambia anapokuja kutakuwa na kikao cha mwanzo, entrance meeting, na kwenye ile entrance meeting anakuambia requirements zake kwenye kile kikao. Katika ile entrance meeting mnazungumza, anakuambia vitu atakavyofanya, document atakazozihitaji na estimated time ambapo atakaa na wewe. Na in the course ya ukaguzi, kila anapokuta kitu ambacho hakiko sawa, anakiripoti, kinakuwa discussed. Management wana opportunity ya kuprovide evidence ya kuclear hiyo. Na kabla hajafunga ukaguzi wake, kuna kikao kinaitwa exit meeting. Katika ile exit meeting, auditor anakueleza bayana madhaifu aliyoyaona na anakupa report ambayo you are supposed to respond. Sasa wakaguliwa wengi wanafikiri wakikaa wakiandika majibu basi automatically lazima CAG yakubali? No, kwa sababu wakati mwingine wakaguliwa wanatoa majibu ya kujitetea. Sasa CAG akipata majibu lazima anayafanyia kazi, anayachakachua, anayaangalia, anayadodosa, akiridhika, that's when ana drop an issue. Asiporidhika inaficha kwenye the audit report, and this is the situation ya Muhimbili, ndugu yangu, ulioieleza. Muhimbili kutoa majibu sio automatically kwamba yaliyojibiwa yanafutwa. No, lazima yaliyojibiwa yakubalike na mkaguzi ndio hoja itoke. Na CAG jamani, anafanya ukaguzi wake kwa viwango vya kimataifa vya ukaguzi, zinaitwa E-size.
Kwa kujibu swali lako Ezekiel, mambo mawili: tupate na tusome na tujue, tujenge utamaduni wa kuchambua taarifa zilizopo. Sawa? Kweli uongozi, viongozi watakuwa na incentive ya kuchakachua na kudanganya na vitu kama hivyo. Hiyo niseme tu labda ni hulka ya wanasiasa, kupindisha mambo. Wewe kama mwananchi unajua hali halisi ya mifuko yako, ya hali inayokuzunguka. Tutumie report za CAG, budget, kuelewa hali pana ya nchi. Lakini hilo ni jukumu letu sisi na jukumu la mwenzetu pale wa Nipashe. Tupate taarifa tuweze kuzielewa. Kama tuelewi, tuulize maswali. Pili, katika kulinda haki zetu tutumie pia maarifa. Open Cohesion nimeonyesheni ni maarifa ya wananchi wa Italy. Prozoro ni maarifa ya wananchi, civil society na business, wakaishawishi serikali ifungue kila kitu katika mchakato wote wa manunuzi ya mali za umma. Ukraine ni maarifa yao, wamewashinikiza, wamewapresha mpaka wamefika hapo walipo. Tujaribu na sisi tujikusanye kama wananchi, kama NGOs, kutumia hayo maarifa.
Tukiendelea kuwa failures, tutaongozwa na viongozi ambao sio wazuri. Sasa mimi nitaka kujua ama kupata mawazo hata kutoka kwake, tuanzie wapi ili wananchi wetu au sisi kwa pamoja tusiwe failures?
Inategemea sisi tunathamini nini, uhai na usalama wetu au labda uhai na usalama wa vizazi vijavyo. Tukitaka tuende mbele, tukitaka tuwadhibiti viongozi wetu, tuhakikishe kwamba wao wanatutumikia sisi badala ya sisi kuwatumikia wao, itabidi tusimame sasa. Hakuna mbadala. Pale ambapo kuna uvunjifu wa haki, pale ambapo kuna wizi, inabidi tusimame tuseme hii sio sahihi. Inabidi kama kwenye familia zetu tukubali watoto wetu wanapotukosoa sisi kama wazazi wao. Inabidi sisi kama wananchi tuitikie mialiko ile ya kwenda kwenye mikutano ya serikali zetu za mitaa na tuhoji mapato na matumizi ya hela zetu na fedha zetu na michango yetu kwenye hizo serikali za mitaa.
Nataka niongeze hapo aliposema Aidan, kuwatafuta yule champion wa kusimamia mabadiliko. Kwa kweli nadhani hiyo ndio changamoto yetu. Nani Kiswahili sahihi, nani atamfunga paka kengele? Sijaona kwamba tumeweza kutengeneza kizazi chenye uthubutu wa kufanya hivyo vitu, lakini naona hawa vijana chini yetu sisi, sio age yetu, kidogo wanaweza. Sasa na mchallenge Aidan, kwa sababu najua tumeizungumza hii mara nyingi sana, hii ya 3%. Sio mara moja, sio mara mbili, sio mara tatu. Kwamba the 3% that will use the motivated youth kuanzisha change kidogo, wajishirikishe, maana badala ya kuwa na interest na entertainment peke yake, wawe na interest pia na mikutano ya serikali za mitaa na taarifa za CAG, ili wazitumie kuchallenge uongozi pale unapofanya vibaya.
Tujaribu as much as we can kuparticipate kwenye vikao vya serikali za mitaa, maana hapo ndio priorities zetu zinapochukuliwa, si ndio? Alafu tukitoka humu, let's not sit on whatever we got here, let's try and work on it at our different capacities. Kama wewe ni mwandishi, jaribu kuandika kitu. Tusiachie tu watu ambao wanajitoa muhanga kama kina Aidan waende wakaongee, alafu sisi tukae nyumbani tuseme kwamba it's okay, minority wataturepresent. Hapana. It begins na mtu mmoja mmoja kufikia lengo ambalo tunalikusudia, ambao ni Tanzania ambayo ina maendeleo endelevu, si ndio? Sasa niwashukuru tena, Mungu awabariki. Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, kazi yenyewe ndio hii. Nawashukuru sana. Mjipigie makofi, pigia makofi na watu. Mbarikiwe.